Hi everyone, and welcome to the last video introducing you to what we call our key studies in psychology. So by now you've worked your way through the little pack of all these key studies, and the final one that we're going to take a look at together now is a very famous piece of research called the Bobo doll study. Okay, it was conducted by a guy called Albert Bandura in 1961. And it's, like I say, it's a very famous piece of research. You might have actually heard of it before, involving a kind of giant inflatable clown, if that's ringing any bells with you. But before we get on to the key study, as with all of the other videos, we need to introduce you to some of the key concepts underpinning the Bobo doll study before we can actually look at that piece of research, okay? So the first kind of thing that we need to talk about here before we take a look at the Bobo doll study is the theory that Albert Bandura put together in the early 1960s, known as social learning theory. You can abbreviate that if you want to SLT. So, social learning theory was considered to be a new branch of classic behaviourism. Now, I know you've already covered classical conditioning with Amy, who did a little video about little Albert. Classic behaviourism is this principle that every action, every human behaviour is learnt, okay, via a process of conditioning, either via association or via reinforcement and punishment. So social learning theory was a new kind of little offshoot of classic behaviourism. It still emphasised the fact that we learn our actions and we learn all behaviour. However, the thing that made Bandura's social learning theory different to other behaviourist theories that had gone before is Bandura chose to emphasise the role of cognition in human and animal behaviour. So he said that cognition, i.e. thinking, played an important role. It wasn't just as simple and straightforward as monkey see, monkey do, all right? With classical and operant conditioning, there's this kind of thought process underneath it that we just learn automatically. Now, Bandura didn't believe that, okay? He referred to social learning theory as a socio-cognitive theory. Yes, we are learning, but we think about our actions before we do them, okay? So that's just a little bit of an introduction to Albert Bandura's socio-cognitive theory, okay? Now, what we're going to do with this here, just to introduce you to a few more of the kind of basics of this theory, is we're going to watch a short video clip. Now, this is slightly different to everything else that you've done on the previous tasks, but what you're going to do is make a glossary of some of the key terms. There's a lot of lingo that goes with social learning theory. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video here in a second and write this list down first, okay? And then we'll watch the video together and you can kind of play it backwards and forwards as much as what you need to. But you're looking out for the definitions of the following words. So, learning, models, identification, reinforcement, punishment, cognitive processes, mediational factors, which will also be referred to as mental cognitive processes, but they are two different phrases there. Attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So pause this now, write that little list down, and then we're going to watch the video outlining some of those basics. Okay, so now what we're going to do then is watch a really short part of this video clip. It's 9 minutes 49 in total, but we're not going to watch all of that. We're only going to watch the defining of the key aspects, okay?
Hello, welcome to PsychBoost. In this video, we'll be looking at social learning theory. This is a development of the original learning theories by Pavlov and Skinner. What we're going to do is we're going to define key aspects of social learning theory and discuss in detail research by a psychologist called Bandura. There'll be specialist terminology to learn, such as mediational processes, and we'll mention some ways we can evaluate the social learning approach to psychology.
1, 2, 3.
Let's have a look at some of the key assumptions that social learning theory has. Well, when it comes to learning, social learning theory develops from the other learning approaches by highlighting the fact that learning for humans takes place in a social context. We learn from exposure to other people's behaviour. These other people act as models for our own behaviour. And these can be real people, so these are live models, or they can be symbolic models. Symbolic models are people you might see on TV or movie characters. How much we identify with the model is going to influence the likelihood of whether we're going to imitate them or not. So we're going to look for characteristics that are similar to our own, such as gender, age, education, ethnicity, and the models we relate to most closely are more likely to be imitated. In common with the other learning theorists, reinforcement and punishment play a role. Behaviours are more likely to be repeated if they are rewarded directly. But importantly, a social learning theory is interested in observation of models. If a model is observed being rewarded, we're more likely to repeat that behaviour ourselves. And this is called vicarious reinforcement. The observation of someone else's reward leading us to behave like them. So in the reverse, behaviours are less likely to repeat if they're punished directly, or we see a model being punished. So this would be vicarious punishment. So what's the main difference between social learning theory and the learning theorists we spoke about in the previous video? Social learning theory suggests there are internal mental processes, while the other learning theories totally disregarded the idea that there are internal mental processes. But these cognitions are important for social learning theorists, and they suggest these processes must be present in order for learning to happen. These learning processes are called mediational factors. There are 4 of them, and we'll discuss them one by one. Mediational factors are mental cognitive processes, so thought processes. They need to take place between the stimulus, the model, and the response, the behaviour. So these mental processes happen in the mind. So number 1, attention. Of course, to learn from a model, we need to actually pay attention to the model behaviour. If we didn't see it, we can't imitate it. Certain factors are going to make it more or less likely for us to pay attention, such as, for example, how interesting the model is, or maybe the cognitive ability of the observer to pay attention without getting distracted. As well as paying attention to the behaviour actually has to be remembered. If the observer forgets that they've seen the observed behaviour, they're not going to imitate it. Of course, some behaviours are quite complex and aren't easy to remember. If these aren't retained, they're not going to be repeated. So we might see a behaviour, we might be able to remember seeing it happen, but what we also need is the motivation to actually imitate the behaviour. This is based on anticipated rewards for carrying out the behaviour or possible punishments, and this is going to influence whether we decide to imitate it or not. Finally, reproduction. Some behaviours we might just not be skillful enough to repeat, or we might not have the resources. So here's an example on the right hand side. Here's a young girl, I'll call her Kate, and Kate has seen Alice punch Billy for his sweets. Now in this scenario, Alice gets to keep the sweets. So first of all, Kate just sees, Alice punched Billy for his sweets. She's paid attention. She then retains this information. I've just seen Alice punch Billy to get his sweets. So she's seen it. She's remembered it. Motivation. I want sweets. She sees a possible reward. Alice punched Billy. She got his sweets. She wants sweets as well. That's enough motivation. Reproduction. Is she able to reproduce the behaviour? I'm bigger than Alice. I could punch her for the sweets. So we can see in this mediational chain of thoughts, Kate has paid attention, she's remembered what she's seen, she has the motivation to reproduce the behaviour, and she has the ability as well. Now, one point to make, learning and performance aren't actually the same. Kate might have learned that to get the sweets, she could punch Alice, but the performance, punching Alice, isn't necessary for Kate to have learnt the lesson. Maybe Kate's going to hold fire for a while. Maybe next week or next month, she'll enact what she learned. The information has been processed.
Okay, so just going to stop that there, okay, and I want to just pick up with what the guy was saying in the video there initially, that just because we observe a behaviour, just because we pay attention and we retain that information, does not necessarily mean that we will imitate it, okay? There has got to be a motivation that gives us a desire to want to imitate. Now, as part of your glossary that you were just making, all right, there, some of the things that do motivate us are identification with the role model. Okay, so hopefully you got a little definition of what identification means and what are some of the characteristics that allow identification to take place. And then also what you would have seen in that video clip is reference to reinforcement and punishment. Now, reinforcement and punishment, as it said, can be direct, but they can also be vicarious. This is the process by which you are receiving a reward or a punishment by witnessing your model receiving either reward or punishment. So, in order to check that you've understood some of those basic bits of terminology, we're now going to watch a second video clip. This is an advertisement from the mid-1990s, and it builds on some of the principles of social learning theory. Now, there's no words or anything in the video. I mean, there's some spoken language, but there's nothing really kind of to help you explain this. So what I would like you to do is like you to look back at all those bits of terminology that you've just come across there and hopefully been processing. And I want you to watch this video clip now, and I want you to try and apply as many of those new key terms to this advertisement as possible. Okay, so the video clip is about 1.5 minutes long. You then want to pause this slideshow, my video, and try and write this paragraph. This is one of your tasks that your teacher will be checking.
It looks like rain again today. Dark clouds gather and fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say goodbye.
Have you actually got a driver's license? I don't think so. Did you see his back there?
Go back where you came from. Learn this way.
Go back where you came. What's wrong with you, Harry?
Get over here. You don't want to see. I've had enough of you. I've had enough of you.
Okay, so that's quite a controversial advertisement there, but one of the things that social learning theory has been used quite prominently for is to educate people in terms of how the media can influence children's behaviour. So what I want you to do now is pause this here and see if you can explain some of the actions that you've just seen in the advertisement there, using as many of the key ideas of social learning theory as possible. Okay, so now that we've got to grips with some of the key terms associated with social learning theory and some of the key concepts, we're ready to move into what we call our key study for this area. So with the Bobo doll study, because it's quite a complicated piece of research and there's a procedure that goes alongside it, what I thought would be useful for you here would be to make a little mind map, okay? So what I would like you to do is pause the video for a moment before we watch the next video clip and make it a mock-up of the mind map that I've got on my screen right now. So it doesn't have to look identical, but make it colourful and make it vivid. And you definitely need all of the sections that I've got here. So a section for aim, the sample, so who are the participants, the method used by Bandura, stage 1, which was modelling, stage 2, which was arousal, and stage 3, which was delay. And then you want a bigger section for the findings. So pause this here, guys, and make your little mind maps, and then we're going to move on to a short video clip of the Bobo doll study. Okay. So what we're going to do now together is watch a short video clip of some of the original footage. Albert Bandura himself talks you through some of the footage that you're going to see. So we're going to do that now. You can, if you want, to try and make some notes, but they're not especially detailed in this particular video clip. So what we're going to do after we've watched the original footage is we're going to have a look at a detailed description of the Bobo doll study. Now I'm going to insert the clip, the link into this video, so you should be able to hit the link once we've finished and have access to this PDF. But the PDF link will also be on your instruction sheet, so you can access it in either one of those two ways. So let's just have a quick look of the original footage.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down and beat it. It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language.
Okay, so now we've seen some of the original footage, you are now going to go into quite a detailed description of the Bandura Bobo doll experiment, and this will allow you now more time to be able to complete that mind map. You'll be able to break down the study into those relevant aspects. So I will embed this link into the video clip here, but if you can't access this, then this link is also on your instruction sheet. But if we hit that link, it should take you through into a PDF. Okay. So this is what you should be able to see. So you can access that now either by clicking the link in the video or clicking the link on the instruction sheet, either one. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a few moments to read through this PDF and obviously complete your mind maps. Once you've completed the mind maps, there are just 5 quick questions that we would also like you to have a go at answering. So if I was to just switch that back to the PowerPoint, all right. These are the 5 questions that we'd like you to answer at the end. Okay, so who were the participants in the Bobo doll study? Okay. Apologies there, guys, I don't know what happened. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Just a few seconds longer. There we are. So who were the participants in the Bobo doll study? What did Bandura mean by modelling? What is meant by mediational processes? What was the purpose of the arousal stage in the Bobo doll study? And who were the most aggressive participants? And how did Bandura explain this? So once you've got your mind map completed, answer those 5 questions onto your paper as well, and they will all be checked by your new teacher in September. I hope you've enjoyed learning about all of these key studies. You have got one final task remaining on research methods. Well done.